Okay, so when I say the word Spartan, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably an unbeatable warrior, right? A whole society just forged for war. Well, today we're going to dive deep into that legend, the Spartan military, and peel back the layers to separate the incredible facts from the even more incredible fiction. And it all really starts here. This famous, haunting line for the 300 Spartans who fell at Thermopylae. It just perfectly captures the legend. It paints this picture of ultimate sacrifice, of unshakable discipline against absolutely impossible odds. You know, this one battle in 480 BC pretty much cemented Sparta's reputation as the greatest warrior state in the ancient world. A reputation that, let's be honest, is still going strong today. But was that legend the whole story? Was Sparta really this society of real-life super soldiers? Or is the version we all know and love more of a theme park version, as one historian perfectly put it? Well, the truth is, as it often is, way more complex, and honestly, a whole lot more interesting than the myth. To really understand the Spartan mortar, we have to look way beyond the battlefield. So, to get to the heart of the Spartan army, we first have to understand the unique, and let's call it what it was, the brutal society that created it. Because the Spartan war machine, it wasn't built for what you might think. This right here is absolutely crucial. The entire Spartan society wasn't really geared towards going out and conquering foreign lands. No, it was designed with one main goal in mind: to control its own people. This was a state completely organized around a deep, constant fear. So Spartan society was this incredibly strict pyramid. At the very top, you had the Spartiates. These are your full citizens, the professional soldiers. Below them, you had the Perioikoi. They were free, but not citizens, and they handled all the trade and crafts. And then at the very bottom, you had this massive population of state-owned serfs called the Helots. They did all the farming, all the labor, which freed up the Spartiates to do nothing but train for war. And this is the number that changes everything. At its peak, the enslaved Helot population outnumbered the ruling Spartiates by as much as 7-1. Just try to imagine that. You're part of this tiny ruling class, and you are living on top of a volcano of people who hate you, a volcano that could erupt at any second. That was the day-to-day reality for every single Spartan. So this constant, paralyzing fear of a Helot uprising, it shaped absolutely everything in their culture. The Spartan army wasn't just for fighting other Greeks. It was a full-time police force to keep the Helots in line. They even had a secret police, the Crypteia, where young Spartan trainees were sent out into the countryside to terrorize and murder any Helots who looked like they might be a leader or a troublemaker. It was a society built on terror. And this brings us to the infamous agoge. You know, at age 7, boys were ripped away from their families to be brutalized and indoctrinated. But here's the key thing to understand. The agoge wasn't really designed to create master swordsmen. It was designed to create the perfect cogs for a machine of internal control. It was all about instilling absolute, unquestioning obedience and loyalty to the state, above family, above self, above everything. So, now that we understand the society that made them, what actually happened when these soldiers went to war? Let's shift our focus to the battlefield and see how the reality stacks up against the Hollywood version. The pop culture image, right? It's the master swordsman, the unstoppable one-on-one killing machine. But the reality is, well, it's a different story. There's almost zero evidence that the agoge even included much weapons proficiency training. And that whole idea that they would never ever surrender, well, that myth was completely shattered in 425 BC at a place called Sphicteria, when over 100 Spartiates surrendered to the Athenians. It shocked the entire Greek world. I'm sure we've all heard this line, a Spartan mother supposedly handing her son his shield, saying, "Come back with it or on it." It is a powerful, chilling image. It is also almost certainly propaganda. Historical sources are pretty clear that the Spartans buried their dead on or near the battlefield. They weren't carrying bodies all the way home on their shields. The real importance of that shield wasn't as a stretcher for the dead. It was for the living. Its huge size wasn't just to protect the guy holding it, it was designed to protect the man standing to his left. The shield was the physical embodiment of the whole Spartan ideal. The group, the phalanx, the unit, that was everything. The individual was basically nothing. And this was Sparta's true military genius. It wasn't about individual skill.
It was all about organization. They were the only Greek army with a clear chain of command right down to the small unit level. They drilled constantly, marching in perfect step to the sound of flutes, and they could pull off complex maneuvers on the battlefield that no other citizen militia could even dream of. Their uniform look, the red cloaks, the shields with the lambda, it made them look like a single, terrifying killing machine. They were, for all intents and purposes, the first professional army in the West.
And this timeline really tells the whole story of their rise and fall. It starts with the Messenian Wars, which enslaved the Helots and created the internal control problem that would define Sparta forever. Then you have Thermopylae in 480 BC, a tactical defeat, but a propaganda victory that created the legend. By 404 BC, they'd won the huge Peloponnesian War against Athens, but the seeds of their own destruction had already been planted. And then, 371 BC, the Battle of Leuctra. The Thebans just shatter the Spartan army, and with it, the myth of their invincibility, forever.
So how did this happen? How did the most feared military in Greece just collapse so suddenly? Well, the answer lies in a fatal flaw that was baked into the very core of their system from the very beginning. The ancient Greeks actually had a word for it, oliganthropia. It literally translates to a shortage of men. And that's the tragic irony. Sparta's greatest strength, its elite, exclusive warrior class, was also its deadliest poison. I mean, just look at these numbers. It's wild. Around the time of Thermopylae, you have maybe 8,000 full Spartiate citizens. By the end of the Peloponnesian War, that number has plummeted to around 3,000. And by the time of their final catastrophic defeat at Leuctra, there were fewer than 1,000 of them left. Their incredibly strict citizenship laws and constant warfare meant they just could not replace their losses. So ultimately, Sparta became a victim of its own design. The very system that was created to produce the perfect soldier was so exclusive and so unforgiving that it literally bled the state dry of men. Their legendary war machine just ran out of fuel. But this all raises one last really fascinating question. If Sparta ultimately failed, if its system was so self-destructive, why are we still so obsessed with the legend today? Well, here's the great paradox. As Sparta's actual power vanished from the earth, its myth just grew stronger. Later, Greek and Roman writers, living in more chaotic times, they looked back and created this romanticized version of Sparta. They fell in love with its stability, its discipline, its order, and they kind of conveniently ignored the whole brutal slave system. They created what historians now call the Spartan mirage. And so, in the end, Sparta, the state, died. But Sparta, the idea, it became immortal. And it really leaves us with a provocative thought, doesn't it? Why are we still so drawn to this mirage? What does our fascination with the myth of the perfect, self-sacrificing warrior tell us? Not really about the ancient Spartans, but about ourselves.